Welcome to Story Conversations. I'm Steven.
I'm Travis.
And we are the founding pastors of Story Church. Travis, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm laughy today. I'm giggly.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Are you good?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been a good morning so far.
Spoiler
alert, we're recording this in the morning. Oh, yeah.
Good.
Carried a 100-pound sandbag for a while outside, and it wasn't very fun, but, but I did it.
It's not cold today either.
No, it's not. All right, I got a little simple, silly, just, little pure-hearted opening question for you. What's one small thing that brought you joy recently?
This podcast. What? Pre-recording this podcast. No. Oh, man. Small thing that brought me joy recently. Well, Katie and I have been looking for something mindless to watch at the end of the day. And so we've returned to Old Faithful, The Office. And so we're just working our way back through it. And last night's episode was great. And it's, for Office fans out there, it's when the Scranton branch gets closed down. Michael loses his mind, thinks he's going to go save the whole thing. Twists and turns, doesn't get shut down. There's 5 more seasons to come. And Michael and Dwight just do this big journey and go crazy.
And they think they solved it by sitting outside someone's
David
house.
Wallace's house. And they get the voicemail that the Scranton branch is not closing, and they have this big crying, emotional up and down situation. It brought me joy. I sat on the couch with Katie and ate strawberries and watched The Office. So what about you?
That's good. I think I got two examples. Both are family related as well. One is it's a regular fun thing that happens, but Hallie just frequently learns phrases from the older children at our church that she doesn't understand, but then uses them like with the right inflection and the perfect way, but clearly not understanding it. And the most recent one is "Give me a break" that she learned. And so my mother and father-in-law were in town recently, and she starts, playing with my mother-in-law. And then every few minutes when we're talking, Hallie just goes, "Grandma, give me a break." And my mother-in-law just looks like, "What?" And looking at me like, "What?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she clearly didn't know what it meant because she didn't use it right, but she said it perfect.
That's awesome.
So that was good. And then, the other night, Allison and I were just laughing about the day. I kind of just got the giggles and just were teasing each other, making each other laugh as we were winding down. It was like one of those good reminders that just simple joys in life of your kid saying something funny or your spouse, either of us doing or saying something stupid and it making the other person laugh, and then you just can't stop laughing. It's just laughter's so good. Yeah. I love that. I'm thankful for laughter. So yeah,
that's great. That's really fun. And laughing with your spouse is like one of the cures to many marriage ills.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you got that moment.
That's awesome.
I love also the "give me a break," and you got to teach her the face palm to go along with "Grandma, give me a break." And the shake, the subtle head shake. I am so disappointed in you, Grandma. You have no idea. That'd be really fun to teach her that and just see what happens.
Oh, it's the best.
Ooh.
Oh man. Well, we are going to jump into a little recap review of week 2 of Advance, Rooted in Love. So Travis, do you want to do a little recap of where we went this Sunday and kind of give a little overview of rootedness for us?
Yeah, so we're continuing to journey through Paul's prayer in Ephesians 3, and verses 17 through 19 is being rooted in love, and particularly this idea that there's a knowledge of Christ's love that surpasses knowledge, and kind of the hyperbole behind that of the knowledge in head is meant to penetrate into the knowledge of heart. And we can have a tendency in our branch of evangelicalism to divorce the head and the heart too much, I think, and to move really quickly into an unfeeling theology that becomes kind of almost like a laboratory theology where it's, let's study this thing, let's put it under a microscope, let's dissect it, let's understand all the things around it. And even just kind of is like the different types of love and defining all the Greek words around it and understanding all, those are good pursuits, so long as those pursuits make their way into our hearts and impact us. And it's not just we dissected the thing in the laboratory, now toss it away and move on to the next niche theological topic and dissect that and move it away and those kind of things. This is the kind of thing that's foundational to our faith. And so this idea that the head and the heart get united in not just knowing but experiencing Christ's love towards us. And then I love in verse 18 when Paul is talking about the dimensions of Christ's love, and he's being so broad with it and using every direction and measurement choice to show us that the love of Christ towards his people is limitless, it's inexhaustible, it won't run out. And so just sitting in that, and then the final capstone for me that really impacted me as I was getting ready for this sermon was the idea of all of this being just this one-way love. And Paul's not praying for the Ephesian church to increase their love for Jesus. He's not praying for them to have a better, more refined love for Jesus. He is simply praying for them to sit and receive the love of Jesus for them, and that's it. Like, full stop. And that kind of, when I unlocked that, I'm kind of sitting there thinking like, well, there should always be a response. And yeah, sure, like the Bible is clear in how we respond to it. But in this particular passage, the response is just be and receive, and then have it seep deeper and deeper and deeper into the soil of your heart so that the roots, this rooted in love, grow stronger and wider. So what about you, man? What were some things in the passage that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think this idea of rootedness is something that, just to back up a little bit for me, it's just something I desire and is a on a broader sense, a concept that I feel like I'm actually really thinking about for the first time and understanding. And a lot of that's because I moved multiple times growing up. And then, I did a junior college before I transferred to university. And so had like different stints there. Yeah. Did 3 years at a university, and then, 5 years in Dallas doing seminary there. And so I think there's something about having lived here now for more than 5 years that I'm living in the place that I've living here longer than I've lived anywhere for a very, very long time in my life. There's always been this sense of relationships, being temporary, or Scott just sneezed really loud, just in case anyone's wondering why Travis started laughing. And we are recording this in the sanctuary in case the you're not seeing this on video.
Back to your point.
So anyway, but yeah, there's just something about, we got to recover that real quick.
Bless
That's
you.
all right. Bless you, Scott.
Yeah.
In every way.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Texas slang.
But yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, like the way that I have thought about vocation, relationships, and even like place and living and identity and culture has always been these sort of temporary stints in different places. And then even coming here to plant a church together, not that I didn't think we were going to make it, but there's a lot of sort of questions and what ifs. And again, for us as in our family, we're not from this area. And so this was very new. We don't have relationships here, pre-existing stuff. Like a lot of families in our church, there's a lot of people who grew up here or just around kind of the IE and SoCal and whatnot. Anyway, and so I just have felt like a growing desire and also a perspective shift of this concept of being rooted somewhere, rooted in a community, and this idea of place and where you're from. And especially after having kids, both of our kids being born here too, realizing like this is where they're from now. Yeah. And Lord willing, we get to go the distance and do this. This is where they'll grow up. This will be home for them, And so that idea of like home and place and rootedness and longevity, in some ways I feel like I've not really been able to explore that or experience that or think in those terms for like 15 years, basically, or whatever the numbers end up being. And so, it's exciting though. It's a desire that I have, and it's a thing God made us for that I think is broken down in America and in just the reality of the world of just, you go to college a lot of times not where you live, and then you don't move back home, you move somewhere new, and then you get a job, and just this idea of kind of transience is just a lot of how life works, and financially too, how you have to do it just to make it, in the state that we live in and just in the world that we are. And so, yeah, I think it's a deep need that God's put in us. It's His design for us to have community, longevity in relationships, and be committed to a people and to a place and to a church. And then certainly as a pastor, as a vocation, all of that is wrapped up in one. So I'm excited about that. And then something about passing that 5-year mark of, as we're about to do that, of, this fall, of since we launched, though it's been more than 5 years since we started doing Story Church things, certainly. I want that. And so anyway, that's the backdrop for me as I've looked at this passage and thought about this idea of going deeper. I think that permeates our lives more than we realize. If we're thinking in terms of rootedness holistically, I think if you're not committed to a people, you're not committed to a place, you're not committed in your relationships, you're not committed in various ways, there's not like a sense of loyalty and a desire for longevity, then when we talk about being rooted in Christ and rooted in love and committing ourselves to those things being fixtures and pillars in our life, I think it's hard for people to do that, or it feels foreign, because a lot of our life is not rooted. A lot of our life is disconnected and disenfranchised, transient and open, and I don't really know. And then there's legitimacy to that. So anyway, that's kind of where I've been thinking about that, and thinking about raising children and making friends and doing life with people and doing ministry with people and seeing what God does in my own heart, in my family, and in people I care about, and in our church over the course of years and decades is such a different perspective and a different way to frame life that I feel like in some ways I've kind of been robbed of that because of circumstances. And so I have some thoughts on the passage specifically and kind of somewhere the spiritual angle of it. But yeah, that's really what has hit me as we've talked about this. I've started to realize why this is kind of a new opportunity, a new thing. And it's like, man, God made me for this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and when you think about Eugene Peterson, like the phrase he coined that is enduring is that our faith in many ways is a long obedience in the same direction. Or you read Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress and Christian's Journey, back to paradise and stuff. What that all requires is kind of that staying power or that rootedness that you're touching on. And I think some of the advent of technology in airplanes, the ability to just pick up and be anywhere within less than a day, literally anywhere on the globe.
Yeah.
And the ability that previous generations didn't have to be exposed to the wider world. In many ways, that's really good for God's mission, because we can send people anywhere and we can experience things and we can learn languages and learn about people and cultures and stuff like that. But on the other hand, I think one of the unintended side effects of that is it kind of gives us the grass is greener mindset all the time, that somewhere else is going to be better. Somewhere else is going to unlock more money for me, better circumstances for me, more opportunity for me, a better lifestyle for me, a better political system for me, a better church for me, a better all of those kind of things. And as I've heard it said, the grass is not greener, it's just a different shade of green,
right,
wherever you look at and stuff like that. And so I think it creates in us kind of this angst of, I got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
I got to go. I got to adventure. I got to be on these things, and the idea of this long obedience in the same direction of saying this is where I'm rooted unless God speaks to me and calls me elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like the long-term side effects of that are certainly less adventure or whatever, but the long-term side effects of that is better community.
Right.
And knowledge of a people and a place and mission opportunities and growth with others. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think what I have seen, I understand now as far as in our culture, the tendency to want to escape, and that can be obviously digital with entertainment or with reading or fantasy and different things like that. But I think there's a desire, even in our church sometimes, it's not a bad thing, but to just get out constantly, to escape the everyday, the boring, and I'm not even trying to make this about like, oh, you got to attend every week, and if you're not, but there's a desire to just like get out, and there's some goodness to that of wanting to be out in God's creation and experience new things, expose your kids to different things in the world. But I just think there's a deep seated sort of like restlessness that we have, where we just want to escape our circumstances, and we need either to bring newness in by buying things and getting new experiences, or we want to like go places, and there's just like this angst that we just can't like sit and be silent and be calm and just like wait on the Lord. And I think in some ways, like when your life is built around just waiting for the next vacation or the next trip, or, you see your everyday circumstances as like not good and boring or less useful, and everything's really leveraged towards
Yeah.
just like the new thing and the exciting thing and what could be and opportunities, you miss out on what you just talked about, which is the very slow things that God does in us that changes us and grows us. And that's individually, but certainly just in relationship with people. One of my favorite things that I've noticed over the last few months take root in our church is a desire for discipleship, which, to demystify that, that's not just like a program to be part of or a book to go through. Those are forms of it. But like there's groups of guys that just realized, I'm just like working really hard and then trying to go play really hard. And I'm not really doing life with people, and I'm not really like growing because I'm just sort of bouncing back and forth between work and play.
Yeah.
And that's all my life is.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to compromise community, compromise being part of the church, attending church to do that. And there's a handful of guys I've been talking to that are more than a handful that are doing this, but a handful I've been talking to, they're just like, sort of just got bit by the bug of like, oh, wow, this is actually how I grow.
Yeah.
This is what I need, is the everyday, just being in people's lives, doing things with the same people and being honest about struggles and pursuing the Lord together and having fun together and just seeing what God does over the course of years when we do that, which is so simple, but that is not how we live anymore. We live in our closed houses with doors shut and locked. Neighbors are not coming over. The pop in is anathema. We don't want people just like showing up to our houses, all the unannounced. Like everything's scheduled and regimented, and we kind of want control over everything. And there isn't this like openness and bandwidth to live and do things with other people. So then how therefore can we be rooted in love? Not just rooted in God's love, but also be people who are rooted together and are this, support structure that keeps us sturdy like a tree, rooted by living water, where we're able to withstand hardship and things. And so I know in my life that the times when I've had that, even in short seasons in different places I've lived, that just means everything, not just for support when things are hard, but also you just get to see, and other people get to help encourage you by telling you when they see you grow and change, and you get to experience all that, who God is and what he wants to do. And so I see that already happening in our church before we even started using this language. And I'm just excited to see, where that's going to go.
Yeah. And I think it goes back even to the opener question you asked of like, what is a mundane joy you've had recently? Of we have mundane, everyday, ordinary joys with the Lord and from the Lord, and not just that, but hope, peace, love, like these virtues that are not unattainable, pie in the sky virtues or realities to experience from God, but they are very regular things to experience from the Lord, and they happen in the everyday thing. Even, just going back to Eugene Peterson, I forget what book it is, but it might be Working the Angles. He talks about he learned how to be a pastor from a butcher in his town. And it's this long kind of story because Eugene Peterson can't write anything short. And that's not a criticism. Take that back. He meanders.
Paul, John Piper. There's a long list here.
He meanders in his writing, but he talks about how the butcher taught him that the mundane care of people, the mundane presence in his shop every day, the mundane, I'm going to show up to the birthday parties and the weddings and the funerals and stuff like that. And I think there's so much for us as a people where we just say, I'm going to have some stick-to-itness and some stamina for this thing, and I'm going to find ways in my life to get those experiences my heart is craving. And that's a good crave, the appetite for joy and excitement and those kind of things. God created us with that appetite, but I'm going to find a way to say it's not just in that next huge thing that's going to happen next summer.
Yeah.
It can and it should happen in those things, right? The mountaintops and the valleys, but also just like now, today. My daughter making a funny phrase to grandma, and I laughed at that, and laughing with my wife as we got ready for bed, or sitting on the couch watching The Office with Katie, like those kind of things. Those are regular mundane things God has given to us to show us his joy and love and those kind of things. And so
Totally.
Yeah. I have a question for you. One thing I didn't have time to talk about, and I wanted to, is what are ways that you find yourself, maybe some primary and secondary ways you find yourself experiencing God's love towards you? Because I was talking about experiencing God's love, and there's certain ways that I experience God's love, and I think he's created us all uniquely, and he's big enough and powerful enough that it's not just, and it can be, and it is for me, read scripture and theology and feel God's love towards me. But there's a wide array of ways that God helps us experience His love. So how are some ways that you?
Yeah. I think the first one that comes to mind that I'm like, oh yeah, I wish we had a chance to talk about part of that as a church of experiencing it is in worship. Mm-hmm. Getting both in not just reading and taking in an intellectual sense information about who God is and truth, and having that help refresh and remind us, like that's certainly, obviously we get to experience God and be with Him as we read His words to us. But I think corporate worship, specifically not worship in the general theological sense, but corporate worship through song, getting to hear other believers singing words of truth that sometimes we don't believe, sometimes we don't feel, or we've forgotten, as well as ourselves, hearing ourselves sing those things to the Lord is just like this encouragement and this building up and this reminder and the way of receiving God's presence and His love in ways that intellectual exercises or maybe better put, independent and solo efforts as a Christian just can't do alone. And so, I mean, every week when we sing praises to God's name, sing songs of confession, sing songs of, celebration, songs of adoration, all these different kinds of songs that we sing to worship God, they color in different ways who God is, help reposture my heart towards Him, but oftentimes are just a really good way of being seated and not in a place of what I have to do or earn or be, and more just who God is and what He's done for us and what He's done for me. And so, I think that's huge. And we've probably not talked a lot about like, why do we even do worship? It's not just because churches do it or because you're supposed to or because there are worship songs written throughout history, but it's a way that we as a church get to encourage each other with truth. And we get to look to the cross, and bring ourselves to the throne of grace and mercy in our time of need, wherever we are and whatever is going on in our life. We get to experience His love for us and rest in Him in ways that are such a, whether you're standing with your arms out, you're on your knees, whatever posture you take, we're just putting ourselves before the Lord, and we don't really have much to bring or much to offer. Most of us are not professional. Probably none of us are, professional, amazing musicians. Like we just bring what we have to Jesus. We bring it to God and get to just rest in Him. And I think that creates a place of safety in who God is and safety in His love. So that would be the first one. The second one, I think related because it's connected to community and others, is just other people encouraging you, other people reminding you of things that are true. I think that is such a huge way we get to experience God's love and be reminded of who He is, because again, there's only so much you can combat your own negative self-talk or, in your brain, what you're thinking and feeling and what you're, preoccupied by. There's only so much you can just do on your own. Other people empowered by the Spirit and armed with the truth and the truth of Scripture and who walk with Jesus have an ability to just step in at a moment's notice in your life, whether they're trying to, they know what they're doing and they're coming in to talk to you about something or encourage something specific or confront something or whatever, or they're just unaware and they just are prompted by the Spirit to say something, can just be like a balm to your soul of just, oh, I needed to hear that. I needed to be reminded of that. Or, oh, wow, I needed to see that and I didn't see that. And I can think of stories in my life that range from someone confronting me on something and saying something that was hard to hear, but in love, that just, it was like God speaking to me through someone else, because He's using other believers empowered by the Spirit and indwelled by the Spirit and who walk with Jesus to help me grow. And other times I'm just discouraged, I'm down, I'm frustrated, I'm disillusioned, and I just need someone else to tell me God loves me and that I'm enough because He's enough, and I don't have to have it together. And it's like wherever it is on that spectrum. I think it's not just a beautiful thing when someone does that. I think it's a responsibility that we all have that we probably don't realize, or it's like a responsibility and also like a secret power. It's like a superpower we all have because the Spirit is working within us. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, but the times when you just I felt prompted to just like text somebody out of nowhere and just tell them I'm thinking about them or praying about them or ask how they're doing. And then it just like unravels into all kinds of things, and these kind of dominoes fall and go, whoa, oh, clearly God was doing something here, and it wasn't because I, was awesome or some super Christian, but just I'm just following the Holy Spirit. So anyway, I think it's a beautiful thing as we gather together and worship and sing and just get to hear and listen to other people sing words of truth and goodness to us, and just sit at the throne of Jesus and just be with him and experience him. And then, just actually doing life with people enough where someone knows you well enough to say things you need to hear, or just encourage you in ways that like they know you can be encouraged, not just in generic senses. Those remind us of God's love for us, and they're tangible, and they're not just theological and true, but they're real, felt, experiential ways that we get to see God's love.
Yeah, I think when you consider, I mean, that is one of God's primary reasons why he gave us the church, and not and called us to membership in a local body where we're known and loved. If you consider the one another's of the New Testament, which is only done within the covenant community, by far the most frequent one is love one another. And even the other one another's find their source in loving one another. And how will the world know we're his disciples? John 13, by how we love one another. What is the first fruit of the Spirit? It is love. And so I think for all of us, one of the primary ways God has given us to experience his love is within the community of saints, with all the saints, as Ephesians 3 says, where we get to experience God's love towards us through them. And I think the primary way that happens is by creating a gospel culture where safety and time are given to people to be themselves, the best sanctified version of themselves. Where, I mean, just even as pastors, where it's like we find community where we get to turn it off and not be a pastor. We get to not perform. We're not useful to people, but we're in a community where we're just simply Travis and Stephen with all of our failures, flaws, strengths, wisdom, gifts, service, whatever it is. And we just get to, kind of put it on the table. And what we receive is safety and time for people to say, I love you. There's areas to grow, but I love you. And I'm not going to stop loving you because Jesus hasn't stopped loving you, and he never ever will. And so I think that's a good primary way that all of us here need to receive and experience God's love, is in that safe gospel culture community.
Yeah, it makes me think of one of my favorite sermons of all time, shocker, a Tim Keller sermon on friendship. And he talks about, I was making sure I get these right, these 4 qualities of what biblical faithful friendship are, not just what friendship generally is. And he says it's constancy, candor, counsel, and carefulness. And all of those things is how you forge real friendship.
Yeah.
Constancy being presence, like you just said, and regularity, and just a consistent experience of being with somebody. You can't be popping in and out and be inconsistent in order to have a real friendship. Candor, being able to speak the truth and be honest and not hide things and not beat around the bush and not be fake, but be genuine with other people. Counsel, being able to speak words of encouragement, words of wisdom, and help each other, and actually care enough to speak into someone's life and to be in the weeds of things with people instead of just kind of sitting from a distance, judging, worrying, or surmising, and then just never really getting into it with them. And then carefulness, that's just the idea of, speaking the truth in love, but just being sensitive, actually caring about someone enough that you're careful with their heart, you're careful with your words, you're careful with your actions, because you're not trying to hurt them, use them, abuse them, manipulate them. You actually, you desire them to grow. You want their benefit in a sacrificial way. And so anyway, that's one of my favorites. Keller probably stole it from someone else, but that's like most things.
Maybe not.
But yeah.
You never know. Okay, so
what about you?
You said worship community. I mean, certainly through the word, but I would say I have a large appetite for life. And I experience God's love through the good things of this earth. And so whatever it may be, good food, good flavors, good coffee, good writing, good comedy, good beauty in nature and things like that. And I'm certainly not like a God's in everything kind of person, but I do believe God created everything, and properly used in wisdom, they are meant to point to his love for us. And so it's not like a trite, like trying to get a laugh or anything, but truly when I eat a good medium rare, on the rare side, ribeye, I experience God's love for me, because like that is the best thing on earth. It is so good. Truly. And God gave us steak, and I love it. And I want everyone to experience that flavor that I'm feeling in my palate right now. And so like, certainly through like the experiences of life, just laughing with my kids, playing with my kids, hanging out with Katie, those kind of things, that would be one. And then another one is I really do experience God's love when I find myself operating within the gifts that he's given me and using them for the service of others, not using them for selfish means or gain, not using them for poor motives, but like, man, when I feel myself kind of sailing with how God has created me, and I feel in that moment like, oh my gosh, I've unlocked some kind of secret where, God, you are being glorified and people are being helped and served through this in ways that I don't even know and probably never will know. Like, thank you. Like, I can't believe you would use someone like me. And you love me enough to use someone like me.
Yeah.
And like, I do in those moments. Outside of what you said, I would certainly echo that. But like, by experiencing life and experiencing being used by God in the ways that he's created me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, rooted in love.
Yeah. I know, I think a related topic here, or from Scripture, not topic, but just angle here, is this idea of not just pursuing rootedness in love, but from John 13, that God's word clearly says that, we're his disciples if we love one another, but more than that, that we will be known. We should be known for our love. We should be known by our love for one another. I think it specifically says, if you have. People will know you're disciples if you have one love for one another. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on our identity as a church, not just Story Church, but as a church family, as far as what we are known for, have been known for, and how can we endeavor to be known by our love rather than known by our ministries or by our numbers or by our branding or by the building, other like outward things. What would it look like for us to be a church that's known in our community by our love?
Yeah, I think, just my immediate thought, that's a fantastic question that I probably need to think more about. But my immediate thought is, Ray Ortlund says there's gospel doctrine and gospel culture. And we have good gospel doctrine around Story Church. We have gospel centrality in all of our ministries. And I find myself, anytime we do a baptism interview or member interview and we ask people to articulate the gospel, I'm always shocked at like, whoa, they get it. Not because it's like a surprise, like, oh my gosh, that person, wow, I didn't think they got it. But with the accuracy with which they're able to articulate the gospel in their own words, I love hearing that. I would like to see gospel doctrine penetrate deeper into gospel culture in the life of our church, where some of those ingredients we were talking about in biblical friendships are more present, or the idea of, I think it's kind of in the care world, they call it safety, time, and peace, is what marks gospel culture. So again, the idea of safety, where someone can be real, time, you're not going to give up on them, and then peace, they're not going to be met with vengeance or vitriol for being themselves over a long period of time. And when they do progress in the faith, but they inevitably fail because they're sinners who will fail, I'm a sinner who will fail, it's not like, ooh, we're going to take you back and we're going to pull all that stuff away from you, but the same safety, time, and peace is still present because people will mess up. And so I think I would love to see, I think that there's pockets of that, but I think there's a yearning for that. I think it's just creating the space for it is where I would love to see our church grow. And I think some of the ways that happens is going to be in home group, in post-service prayer, in just emailing one of the pastors and saying, I need some help, emailing one of your friends and saying, I need some help. I think what it's going to take is for some of us just to wave the white flag and say, I am struggling and I don't know the way forward. And we can have that gospel culture towards each other. And if there's anyone listening to this that's just like, I'm afraid to be honest about it, we've said it before, but probably not enough. Anything that you confess, God's already aware of, and anything that you confess, none of us are going to be slack-jawed about it.
Yeah.
None of us are going to be angry about it. None of us are going to be full of vitriol about it. We're going to try to, as best as possible, mimic Christ to you with this one-way type of love being talked about in Ephesians 3, where, hey, you're struggling, and I'm not expecting a single thing out of you other than just honesty.
Yeah.
And all I want to do is love you through this, remind you of what's true, help you along the way. And so those are some of my initial thoughts. Again, I probably have to think about that a little more. What about you?
It's a big question for sure. I think God desires us as a church to kind of put to death a culture, to put to death suburban pride and suburban pursuits. That's just the phrase that popped in my mind just now. We just want to look good. We want to have it together. We think highly of ourselves. We control our schedules and our lives. We don't really want to hear what other people have to say about what we're doing. Like we want to feel like things are stable, like we're able to have fun, that we're able to do things. We want to preserve what we have. We don't want to lose anything that we have. And we're afraid of being hurt by other people. Like we build these little houses of cards in the suburbs that is a lot of pretense and a lot of posturing, whether we intend it to be or not. And that's a lot of what life looks like here. Mm-hmm. And as Christians, we just often mirror that and copy what's going on around us. And I think God wants to put that to death. And in order for us to be a church that's loving, then we have to put that to death. Mm-hmm. Because if we're not willing to sacrifice all of the various pursuits that are available, the opportunities and options for things we can be doing with our time and our money and with our families in order to commit ourselves to biblical friendship and community and God's church and being part of God's family, then we'll never be able to get in close. We'll never be able to be vulnerable. We'll never be able to be honest because our eyes will be elsewhere. But on the other hand, as far as a character flaw that all of us as human beings have, it's just a deep-seated pride where we are very confident in what we do and how we think the world works and what we think is right, and not in a biblical sense, but in just our personal decisions, convictions, and whatnot, and just how our philosophy of how we live and parent and spend and do all these different things. We just don't want anyone else to speak into it because we're afraid that we're going to have to change it. We're afraid that someone's going to expose something or we're going to feel embarrassed or look bad. Mm-hmm. And like, there's just a pride in us. And I think in the suburbs particularly, where we feel like we've built what we have, and so therefore it's ours. And I'm not even just talking about money, but just our life. We've put this stuff together, and so we deserve to do what we want with it. And that just kills vulnerability. That kills honesty. That kills admission of weakness. And I think if those things can be put to death in us, in our culture as a church, that we can be countercultural in those ways, then it unlocks so much as far as following the Spirit to love others well, to confess sin, to be open about our struggles, to both offer help to others and ask for help from others. But pride and constantly pursuing other things, it doesn't allow us to be people who help and love one another, or even are open enough to receive and what others may have for us, what God may want to do through others in our lives. And so I could just see like God doing, and I don't even mean that in like a, in a negative, like, oh, this is a dirge kind of situation, how are we going to get out of it? But I could just see what it would look like if we just committed ourselves to not just be a copy paste with a sprinkle of Christianity version of our neighbors and our friends and people outside the church. If our lives and are structured, organized, our decisions, our finances, our time was just not a copy paste version for the most part of what other people are doing, and it was actually drastically different and centered around things of Christ, people would look at us and go, what's that about? And if our church as a whole continue to grow in that, so I'm not saying we don't have any of that as a church, but if we continue to grow and commit ourselves to that, we would experience each other, and then people would experience our church in such a way that would just be so different from just another church, because it would truly be something that we all long for and desire, which is to be loved by others, but it would be real, and it would be a large group of people who are very different and don't have a ton in common other than Jesus, committing to do that together. I think that would be so transformative for us as a church, and it would make Story Church known for so much more than anything we could do with facilities, branding, website, events, and whatever else.
Yeah, I think what both of those answers share in common is, just to bring it back to another Keller phrase, is like the love of Christ is both being fully known and fully loved.
Yeah.
And so it's not just this idea I'm fully loved, but he loves us in a way that he fully knows down to every atom of our being. And that's the type of love we can have in our church, where we can fully know one another and fully love one another. And then his other phrase is, we're far more sinful than we could ever imagine, but far more loved than we could ever imagine. I butchered that, but that's the essence of it. And so this gospel love, this rooted in loveness in the culture of our church is, again, just being fully known and then fully loved on the back end of it. And so that'd be something for us to all prayerfully pursue together. And it comes back to this rooted idea. How are we going to be known unless we're not rooted for a long period of time?
Yeah.
And just like something over the last couple of weeks as I've preached, I've taken some risks on sharing some personal stuff to be known by our church in broader ways than just my community that knows these things. I've been encouraged to receive love and not like, because sometimes you take those risks, and I've heard horror stories of pastors being like, man, I shared an honest part of my life and someone left our church over that, or whatever else. And like, I didn't receive any of that. It's just like, dude, we love you.
Yeah.
And like, it's cool to take risks and be vulnerable and be met with love, because that just gives you fuel in the tank. That's so much better than like I'm not known, but the veneer version of me is known, and people cheer that veneer version on of me when they're cheering on the real version of you, and not because of what you do, but because of who you are in Christ. Like, that's so cool to experience that.
And just bringing it back to Ephesians 3, the only way we can practice that and live that and have the courage to do that is if we experience being rooted in love that God gives us and the safety that's there and the perfect version of everything we just described, where there is no judgment, there is no disappointment, there is no measurement of how well we're doing. And it's truly the most safe place you could ever be is in the presence of our God, and knowing that he loves us and has died for us and forgave us and actually likes us and delights in us. Like, that is, unless we spend time rehearsing those truths and experientially together as a church, as we worship, as we read, as we do life together, pushing each other back to Jesus and actually spending time with him to experience that, then we'll never have the courage to do it with others, because it'll just be like a sort of chicken, playing chicken with people of like, who's going to do it first, or who's going to go first, or well, what if I try to live this way and then there's no reciprocity, and then I feel small, or like, those are our fears in doing these things. What if I confess and no one else confesses in my group, or what if I confide in this person and I'm vulnerable and honest like you have been from the stage, and I get criticized or I get crickets, like, those are real fears. And I think the only way we can overcome those fears is to not rely on needing other people to sort of satiate those needs in us, and making sure that we are totally satisfied and resting in Jesus Christ alone. That gives us the settledness and the rested spirit to then have the courage to do that with others, and just go, oh, God's going to use me, and I can trust he's going to do what he's going to do, and he's good. Yeah,
that's good stuff. So we're praying for you, church. Let's be rooted in love and rooted with one another and in our love for one another. Okay. Fun question. Back to school season. Many of us are back into full rhythms of school and life and stuff. So going back to, maybe let's call it like junior high and beyond, what
real school.
Yeah. Well, because like elementary school, you do different subjects, but you don't, you move between classrooms and stuff like that. So when you got your schedule for the year for, let's say, 10th grade, what period did you look forward to because you're like, I love this subject? And then what period did you look at and you're like, I'm competent at it, I'm good at it, but I don't really like this? So twofold question, back to school.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, unsurprisingly for those who know me, maybe surprising for people who don't know me very well, calculus was the one that I looked forward to the most, because there's something, my brain is wired that way, just formulas and calculations and getting in and around that, those parts of the mathematics world are just how my brain works and have always kind of come naturally to me. And so I really enjoyed that, just because it was like really hard things that everybody complained about that I enjoyed and just did really well. And so that was definitely the one that was fun. But also we did like more fun things than I probably most math. My math teachers were pretty good. We did some
Cool.
fun stuff. But the one that I was less excited about, it's interesting. It's changed. Probably history. I did not have the most exciting history experience in school. And so it was like, it's easy. And it was never an issue as far as grades and things. It was just writing short essays and multiple choice questions about stuff. But I didn't have like a experience like I've had since reading like David McCullough and other like great historical authors, where like history comes to life and you like have questions about it in ways that it almost feels like fiction and you want to know all the details. Like I did not have that experience at all.
Yeah.
Like history was just very droll, very boring, very just like flatlined, and it was just like everyone was like falling asleep in class, especially in high school. So that's my second answer.
You heard it here first, kids. Math is fun.
It is, man. Math is cool.
It can be. It's very useful. That's for sure.
My little pitch for math is it's not for any kids listening or people who hate math.
Youths.
Math is less about the specific skills in how you're doing those calculations, and it's more the discipline and ability that it creates in you to create, to both creatively sometimes, but to problem solve, because life is so much problem solving, sometimes creatively looking at different options, and sometimes it's just about efficiency.
Yeah.
And math is really all about like carefully and efficiently figuring out how to solve problems and get the right answers. And a lot of people do not have really great critical thinking and problem solving skills, and that makes life really hard, because no matter what you do or where you go, you need those things. And so math is not fun for most because it doesn't feel like it's like applicable for life long term. It's really niche and specific, but if you commit yourself to doing those things, it develops in your mind and a discipline and an ability to approach hard things and hard questions and navigate them and figure them out. That's what math does for you. So math is awesome.
AI solves my problems now.
Take that, haters. AI solves your problems.
I don't need to problem solve. It does it for me.
Math GPT.
The dumbing down of society. Okay. Rooted in math. My, let's see. In a lot of ways, I'm the inverse of that. Was
Shocker.
Was always,
You and I
was always very competent in the math stuff. As my mom made me, because she probably couldn't stand me being in the home, but she made me go to Chafee throughout like various summers, and I graduated out of all of high school and college math by my 10th grade year, which was sweet when I went to actual college because I didn't have to take any math for the rest of my life. Sciences were like, chemistry was fun because you could like blow things up and
Chemistry
set
lab.
things on fire. Yeah. The memorizing of the periodic table was like the worst thing of my life. So I was competent at those things, did not enjoy them at all. Didn't look forward to them. I loved anything in the history, econ, government category. We had a fun government teacher that would stage like debates and stuff like that. And I craved debates, unsurprisingly, in high school. And so, loved all the history, U.S. history, world history, econ, government. How does the economy work? How do finances work? How does government work? What's the three branches? How do they ideally work together and against each other also? So loved all that stuff. And I'm not
the yin and yang comes back.
Literally
inverse experience.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good thing. So it's been fun.
That's cool. That's awesome. Well, thanks for listening in. We really hope this series is encouraging, and again, just that advance and this ministry plan is so much less about doing and more about being, but also these are just things that we really want to grow in as a church, not for a year, but for forever. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the time and place to have these conversations, to walk through these R's in this passage. And just pray about how God can change this pirate passage. R's. I knew that was going to get you.
Or the person that struggles with their R's.
Oh my gosh.
Oz.
Wow. Anyway, hopefully this is encouraging to you, even if Travis is mocking your pronunciation of words with R's right now. But we love you. Hope these things are encouraging to your soul, and we're all in this together. We're growing and learning who God wants us to be as a church, and I just believe He's going to do amazing things in us and through us, not because we're awesome or cool, but because we're just trying to seek Jesus together. And when we do that for long periods of time, and we're rooted in a people, a place, and build our lives around Him and His kingdom, He just does amazing things. So we will see you Sunday, and you'll hear us next week.